Welcome to the AutoBeam animation generator. If you've ever wanted to animate your automation to BeamNG exports, this tool's for you. I've created the tool to simplify the process of adding animated props, and it allows you to generate the necessary code quickly and easily. This program can generate the animation lines needed for various car components, including steering wheels, tachometers, speedometers, fuel gauges, and much more advanced props like engine pulleys and gear selectors. You can also animate throttle pedals, parking brakes, radiator fans, and much more. With the AutoBeam animation generator, you can animate car functions based on props from automation using either rotation or translation. You can add movement to various elements of your car, like translating a button or rotating a gauge needle. Alright, so let's look at the calculations and the string that must be created to have animations on our fixture. This tool will take care of most of this, but it's good to understand how it works. I do recommend watching this section, as certain elements will help you use the tool, but if you wish to skip the manual calculations section, the timestamp will be in the description. This line at the top shows the format and all the variables that are needed for a fixture animation. At the bottom, I've added some example lines, and these are what you would paste into the description tab in automation. Let's look at what we need for each variable. First, your fixture number. This is nice and simple. Just look at the value on the left side in Automation's Fixture tab and input the numerical value associated with the fixture. So if I want the steering wheel on the left, I have to enter 22. Next, the function. As the name describes, this is what kind of function you want the animation to do. There are a lot of them, and they're available either in the README or within the BeamNG documentation. Here's the important part of the string, the rotations and translations. Think of these as the step values, or how far you want the prop to move for one unit of the function you've chosen. We'll go into this with more detail later on. Important thing to note here is that the step value for rotations is positive if you're rotating clockwise with the arrow pointing away from the camera, except for X. If the arrow is pointing towards you, you have to enter the opposite step value. This doesn't matter for the tool, but it does matter if you're calculating the values manually. For translations, the arrow points positive, again except for X. In the tool, just input the value, assume that the arrow points positive for all three. You'll also have to enter the scaling for each axis, as this will affect the transition step values. The min, max, and offset are fairly simple for most props. Typically, like with the fuel gauge on the left, you can simply put the min as the lowest value on the gauge, the max as the highest value on the gauge, and the offset is the equal but opposite value of the min. Now with the boost gauge on the right, you would expect it to be -1, 2, and 1 respectively. However, this gauge displays in bar, and the boost function operates with PSI. Therefore, we must convert all the values to PSI. All of the step values will also have to use these converted values during the calculations. For the multiplier, set it to 1 and leave it alone. It isn't used since we can do the same thing with the other variables. Now let's look at an example for rotation calculation based on this tachometer on the left. With the information in these pictures, we can get these values. As seen in the bottom left, the fixture number is 17, we know the function type is RPM tacho, we know the min is 0, the max is 6000, the offset is 0. Also, because we only want a rotation, we know that all three translation values are 0. We also know that we want the needle to rotate 270 degrees between the 0 and 6000. Finally, we also know that we want it to rotate about the green arrow, which is the y-axis. So we know that the rotation about x and the rotation about z are both 0. With all these values, we can start the calculations. To get the total range, we need to take the max and subtract the min. Once we have that, we can take the angle of rotation and divide it by the total range to get our step value for rotation y. With our example, this means our total range is 6000 and our step value is 0.045. Finally, we need to know if this is a positive or negative step value. We know that all rotation clockwise with the arrow pointing away are positive, Since we want the needle to rotate clockwise with the arrow pointing towards us, the rotation will be negative. With all that information, we have our final animation string. The translation calculations are fairly similar in many points, but there are some differences. We're going to be working based off of this example of a linear speedometer from 0 to 200 km per hour. Note on the left side that the fixture ID is 47, and that we want the orange needle to move positive red. Also note that the red scaling is set to 0.8. We will need that value during the calculations. Finally, as you can see at the bottom of the image, I've added a ruler which can be found in the Miscellaneous Fixture tab in Automation. This allows us to quickly know how far we need a prop to move linearly, which in this case is 10 centimeters. You could also switch the fixture coordinate systems to global by clicking the Q button on the top left and seeing the movement there, since Automation uses centimeters for its coordinate system. To start, we can see the fixture number, which is 47, the function is wheel speed, the min is 0, the max is 200 kilometers per hour, the offset is 0. Similarly to the previous example, we know that the 3 rotations are 0, and since we're moving along x, which is red, translation y and z are both equal to 0 as well. We also know that the distance we want this needle to move is 10 centimeters, and the scaling in x is 0.8. Now for the calculations. The wheel speed function needs to have all values in meters per second. This means that our 200 kilometers per hour will have to be converted into meters per second, which is 55.556 meters per second. If we were working with miles per hour, we would also have to convert it to meters per second. Next, we will have to change our distance value to accommodate the different coordinate systems between Automation and Beam by dividing by 10. We also have to compensate for the scaling by taking our previously calculated distance divided by 10 and divided by the scaling. So in this case, we have 10 divided by 10 divided by 0.8, which gives us a value of 1.25. This is the distance value that we have to use in the step calculations later. We calculate the total range in the same way as before by subtracting the calculated min from the calculated max. We then take our distance value and divide it by the total range to get our step value. For this example, our total range is 55.556 and our step value is 0.023. Note that you can use more precise value for the calculations, and you may be required to do so with certain functions like RPM or altitude when animating a translation due to the very small step values. Finally, we have to figure out if the value is negative or positive. We know that the values are positive if you're moving in the direction of the arrow except for x. In this case, we are moving positive x, which means the step value is negative. And here's the final string that would be put into Automation. Now let's move to the easy way to do this. To install the tool that I've created, you can go to the AutoBeam Animation Generator GitHub page. The link will be in the description below. Once you get to this page, you'll have the README on the main screen. This will contain all the explanation and descriptions for the various tools and calculations. And it's a good guide to refer to when you need help here. On the right side, you can look at the latest release, which is at the moment version 0.7.1. If you come here, you can see the instructions for installing and uninstalling and the changelog for this release version. You can then click on the .exe to download the folder or program. Select here. Program's now open. You can just run it from there. Defender may block it, but that's to be expected because it's a small program. You just hit more info and then hit run anyway. The program will begin to install. Microsoft will stop it and ask if you want to allow the app to make changes to your device. You will have to hit accept to install the program. That was what the black screen there was. As soon as the pop-up's gone, it's installed. It'll now be present in your menu, your app menu at the bottom left, and also have a icon created on the desktop. If you want to run it, you can either run it from either location, or you can go to the file install location, which is C drive, program files, AutoBeam Animation Generator. If you need to uninstall it, you can just go from the typical app uninstaller, or just click uninstall here and it'll bring you to the menu that you need to go. Note that this original file that you downloaded is just an installer. You do not need to run that every single time you want the program to work. To begin, select a function from the drop-down. There is a scroll wheel available on the right side to see the rest of the available functions. Let's use wheel speed as an example. Note, when you select a function, the description will appear in the bottom box for the function selected. You can then enter the prop ID found in automation and select one of the 6 transformation types. You then have to select the unit, in this case kilometers an hour or miles per hour, then select the min, max, and offset values. Then, depending on the transformation type, you'll have to enter the rotation direction and the rotation range. Or, if you select a translation, the translation direction, distance, and scaling. You can then click Calculate, and it'll generate the animation string. If you want to return to the description, you can click the Back to Explanation button on the right, and this will provide the explanation that was there before. You can also click on the Help button, which will bring you to the README on GitHub. Now let's have a look at some examples. Alright, here we are in automation. This is the car I'm going to be using for this video. Just a fairly simple 300 horsepower i6 rear-wheel drive sedan. It does have a 6-speed manual, which is important for the gearbox later on. And this is where you're going to be putting the description. As you can see, it's currently empty. So let's look at the fixtures. Come inside, we have a fairly typical gauge cluster. We have 3 pedals and parking brake here, and the gearbox selectors that we'll be needing for later on. Looks a little funny, but that's what we got to do for the manual gearboxes. So let's start with the speedometer, since this is the first fixture on my list. So let's move to the AutoBeam generator here and off to the side. So this is a fixture number 38, and we want to do a speedometer. So let's look at the wheel speed function, fixture 38, and its rotation about green. So also know this is in 200 miles an hour, so like that. And just, you can math it out using programs online or just guesstimating. So this is 270 degrees from experience. And then we also look, now we need to select the direction. This is we want it to rotate clockwise, but the arrow is pointing towards us. So in this case, it's counterclockwise. We can hit calculate, and there's the wheel speed function for this. So you can copy, come back to automation, and paste it in. Turn to the fixture tab, and let's look at our next one. This is our RPMs. So come back here, RPM 39. Once again, it's counterclockwise. RPM is going up to 9,070 degrees. Calculate. Next one, coolant. So this is the engine coolant temp. Fixture number 40. And counterclockwise. The important thing about coolant, as it shows in the description here, BeamNG only has the car overheat at 120 degrees Celsius. So in this case, we have 60 degrees as the start. This is the first time that the needle will begin moving. It's at 60 degrees, and it will reach the end at 120 degrees, and the car will be overheating at that point. So we have 60, 120, and in this case, we need the opposite of the min, so minus 60, so that the gauge doesn't think that this is 0, and it'll be all out of whack. We also know that this is 110 degrees, so we can just quickly hit calculate. There we go. Next needle is the fuel gauge. This one's nice and simple. Just hit it, select your direction, everything's already set. Now we have our boost. This is like we did in the manual calculations example. So the car doesn't actually reach 2-bar boost. That's obviously quite a bit for a road car. So you can come here, hit bar, since this is in bar, then we can just do a quick -1, 2, and 1. This just brings the dial back to 0 when it starts. We also specify that this is 270 degrees, and also select that we want it to moving counterclockwise. Important thing to note here, I made a mistake before. I didn't change the fuel gauge fixture ID. If you have both gauges or a same prop with both with 2 animations, it will not work. It's going to have a major problem in Beam. Either it won't work at all, or it will only work the second function. So in this case, you can just come back in and swap that. All right, so that's the end of our gauge cluster. So if I keep scrolling down, we end up with steering wheel. So in this case, we have 2 steering wheels. It's a bit hard to see, but if I manually rotate the wheel, you can see this is the fixture for the column. Press undo, Control Z. You can see that I've set the entire wheel portion of the fixture as transparent, with only the column remaining. For this, you have to do this because if you do the animation for the steering wheel, the entire portion, the entire wheel fixture will move, so the column will be moving, which is not how a real car works, obviously. So let's keep coming down the list until we get to the next gauge. So here is the actual steering wheel prop. In this version, I've made the column transparent using this material here, and I've also gotten rid of the indicators and lights so that they don't move when we rotate. So here we come back and select steering for the wheel. This is fixture number 69, and it's still rotation in green. This one is a bit different, so we select clockwise. You leave it as clockwise despite the fact that we want it moving. We want it moving clockwise with the arrow pointing towards us. This is just what you have to leave it as. I've left it open so that you can change it. I've also, in this case, locked the min, max, and offset values. Changing these just doesn't result in any major change, and if you change it too far, it can actually break the animation in Beam. This range of rotation is how far do I want it to visually move. So the recommended is just leave it to 900. If you want, you can set it to 720 or some other multiple of 360 or even 180, and it'll change this step value. So currently that would be 0.8. So in this case, we'll leave it at 900. And then copy that. All right, keep going down the list. End up with indicator stock. So this one, we want it to be rotating clockwise when you turn right. So let's scroll down the list here and look for turn signal 2-way. So in this case, there is a positive and a negative. So that's why the min is set to -1, the max is set to 1. So this is fixture 74. And then we select clockwise. So this 30 degrees that's currently preset, this means it will move 15 degrees up and 15 degrees down. So leave it in that case and see how it looks in Beam. You can always come back and change it afterwards. Fortunately, nothing I can do with wipers. There's no way to actually turn on the wipers in Beam, so that's all right. Let's have a look at the parking brake next. So, go back here. Parking brake. So this one's different. Instead of rotating about green, we're rotating about red, and we still want it to move clockwise. So, fixture 85, rotation about red, clockwise, 30 degrees. Yeah, it seems about right. So tap that. All right, and let's go add that to description. All right, so up next is the throttle pedal. So the interesting note about throttle pedals is a lot of the fixtures for throttle pedals have their origins about halfway down the lever or arm, whichever one I call it. This means that when you try to rotate the throttle pedal or any of the pedals, the bottom half is rotating downwards and the top half is coming back towards you, which is obviously not correct. You might be able to fix this using translations at the same time, but it's a pain to try to figure out the math for that one. So to begin, we'll just use these pedals here, which are at least have the correct rotation or as close to a correct rotation point. These are the RB Race Kit pedals. These rotations points are somewhat close to the hinge, which works all right for this, though I have had to hide most of the fixture, except for the arm and the pedal face. So either way, 88. This one we will also want to rotate clockwise about red. We want the pedal to move down. So let's go back to automation, to the AutoBeam generator. So 88, throttle, rotation about red, clockwise, and let's say about 25 degrees. Calculate. We'll do the same thing for the brake and the clutch. Brake is the next fixture that I've created. We'll do the same here, 25. And then the clutch. And then we can just quickly go back and confirm that we got the exact same. Same rotation about red, 89. Same rotation about red, 90. All right. So in this case, we want to set to manual gearbox, manual shifter right here. So manual shifters are a bit interesting in the way they work in Beam. As you can see, I've had to create a separate shifter for each individual gear that we actually have. So neutral, reverse, and 6 speeds. In this case, I have, I think, 8 fixtures or 9 fixtures. The first one I utilize is the base. It's invisible for the actual shifter part, and the base is the only visible part remaining. First one that I'm utilizing is neutral, so center position. This one you do the opposite, make the base invisible, set the rest exactly as what you want. As a quick example, so I can show how this works. Currently, when you shift into first gear, so let's go forward and to the left, you can't have sequential chains as far as I'm aware in Beam. I'll do some further testing, but at the moment this is the setting that I have that works. Currently, the way that I have it set up is that we have every gear will be underneath the center console in the drive tunnel down here until it is called for. So when you're currently in neutral, first all the gears will be hidden. You put it in first gear flips up, all the other neutral flips down. Put it in second, it goes first, neutral, second, flipping those ones up individually as you go. So let's delete this temporary one. With neutral, we still have to set an animation because we need it to move out of the way when you start. So prop ID is 92, and we want it to rotate 360 degrees in total. So let's set 360 here. Gear position doesn't really matter clockwise or counterclockwise because we're moving all the way around anyways. Min value is the position that you want it hidden, and the max value is the position that you also want it hidden. And the offset in this case is the value that you want displayed. So we want it hidden when it's in reverse, we want it hidden when it's in first gear, and we want it displayed when it's in 0 or neutral. So this we'll set for for neutral. Make sure when you're copying, do not copy the extra note. So there's neutral. Now we'll go back into first gear. First, to begin, let's actually remove the gear lever or gear stick all the way below. So if you enter 90 degrees into the automation local fixture, for some reason they are doubled. Not sure why, but they are. I think I actually did that wrong. 90. There we go. So now the fixture is below. You see though, at the moment it is poking through a little bit. The only way to deal with this, because the fixture is not, the origin of the fixture is slightly off from where it'd be ideal for this, is to grab the base, slightly lift it up just so it's hiding it, and in this case let's just stretch it a little bit so it doesn't poke out of the console, or to use a fixture that doesn't have a cloth like this. So you could use one where this is invisible. We'll just use glass for now. So it's just a stick, pretty much. But in this case I do want it as a leather sleeve, so we'll leave it there. So first gear is now underneath. When you set the animation to go, it'll rotate 180 degrees back up for when it's in first gear, and then 180 degrees back down once it goes into second. So let's go back to AutoBeam. So manual shifter, this is now 93. If you look at the explanation, you can see that first gear has to go 0, 2, and 0. This is the only one where it's sticking, the offset is not being moved. So 0, 2, 0, 360 degrees, calculate. Now we can keep going down the chain. So again, set this below. Actually, I'll just do the quick same for all of these other ones. And then this is going to be my reverse, so I'm going to leave this one for now. So, quick way to do this, since it follows a pretty the same chain, you either keep jumping back to automation, so this is neutral, first, second. So I can go back to automation, 94, increment, increment, decrement. So you want 1, 3, minus 1. Same 360, calculate. But now you can see it's following sort of a pattern where increase the min, increase the max, decrease the offset. So you can actually do is just copy again, paste, and just do 95. If you've kept everything in the same order, 2, 4, minus 2. And then the next, 96, 3, 5, minus 3. So 98 there, that should be our 6th gear. So see it's halfway between the min and the max. So 6th is that one there. And that would be correct for 98. So 99 is going to be our reverse gear. It's a bit of a weird placement for me, but I've put it front right, sort of beside where 5th will be. So let's rotate that one. Not sure why it's done that. Let's rotate that one down below again. And quickly double check that this is not poking out since it's the furthest offset. So that looks all right there. So this one will use the tool since reverse is a bit different. Reverse gear, as it's listed here, you need, gear position is 99, you need to have the minimum value as -1, the max value has to be 0, and the offset also has to be 0. So we'll leave that there. But here's now, since we're only having a 1 unit change, we need to set this to 180 degrees instead of 2, or a set of 360 degrees if we had 2 positions. We only need it to move up when it's in reverse. It never has to go all the way around. We can hit calculate there. Now we still have the same 180 degree rotation. So that's the last fixture for this particular car. There are more fixtures that we can do, but let's have a look at this car in Beam. So if you go to the end, confirm all your gears are correct and you don't have any of the exact same fixture numbers, then you can hit all the way to the right and hit export car. Here we'll keep it like that. When you have a lot of fixtures, it may take a while to finalize the export, but that's sort of the risk you run with having a lot of fixtures. All right, let's go check it out in Beam. Okay, here we are in Beam. If you check your repository, you can see that the mods are, all the automation cars have been added. These are all the ones I've done. The car that we were just working on is in there somewhere. I don't remember what I called it. There it is. I think we called it was Jovial Touring. To be honest, it was a bit of a random name. All right, let's have a check and see if we can drive. All right, here we are finally loaded. So let's go to Vehicles and open the car that we've just exported. All right, so let's go inside. So first thing, just looking at the dash, we can see RPM gauge is currently up. We rev it up to, let's say, 3,000. We're say all 3 gauges, the bottom left, the center, and the right, all seem to have the same point. Fuel gauge is currently correctly showing full, which the gauge is full. Coolant is not yet warmed up, which is showing slightly below. And the bar drops when you are low on vacuum, and then goes up when you accelerate, or when you press the throttle hard. You can also see steering wheel currently moves. Since we set to 900, it moves 450 degrees in each way. You can also see that turn signal works when we move it up and down. Parking brake correctly works. And then finally, the gears. So note that every time you shift a gear, you're always going to neutral, then to the gear position. And then finally, let's look at see the throttle pedals down there. It's a little bit hard to see with the lighting. So all of these functions here work perfectly with translating them from automation to Beam. There are a lot of other functions that we haven't used, and there are some special things that you can do with the car with the functions fixtures once you get creative with. So let's take a look at some of the other things that you can do with the functions. Here's another car that I've been working on. So this one has a couple different features compared to the previous one. So still has all the basic gauges, dials, steering wheel, parking brake. However, this one, if you look on the left here, this one has a key that functions. It has 2 positions, on or off. There doesn't seem to be a start function within Beam, so that's probably the best you can do. This one, though, is an automatic. So look at relative view here. As I move through the gears, we move the column shifter and the gear indicator. The gear indicator is just done through translation using the automatic gearbox function within AutoBeam, and the rotation is done, the gear shifter is done using rotation for that same function. This one also has a little light knob, so when you turn the lights on, it pulls it further and further out. This is using the lights function, so 3 positions: off, on, or off, low, high. Another interesting thing here, this car has hidden headlights, like in the intro. So when I turn the lights on, this is using the two-way function, so there is only an on or off. When I turn it on, the little flap moves back by rotating, then translating to the center of the car and translating backwards. This car also has an engine fan, utilizing the RPM spin function. So whenever the engine's running, this fan spins at the same speed as the engine. You can also use this to create pulleys, which is an interesting thing to do. So let's have a look at one more car who has a couple of different functions. So first thing, we have shift lights. So these things work utilizing the RPM function. Every single shift light has a min that is set 1 RPM lower than the max. So as you rev up, the RPMs turn off or turn on at the low RPM and then stay on throughout. So I think the lowest one turns on at 6,000 RPM or whatever. Each of these is utilizing 2 different lights. So there is one, see if I can get a good view of this. There's one unlit bulb, and there's one lit bulb. So the lights are only on the moment when the car's on. So once you hit the specified RPM, the unlit bulb moves back and the lit bulb moves forward. And then you just have a progressive RPM scale for each single one. This car also utilizes a dual clutch transmission, which means you can't utilize the base automatic gearbox function for the indicator. So this one utilizes the auto manual function within AutoBeam. So this one will only move from park to sport. If you were using the automatic, it would move from park, reverse, neutral, drive, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever, all the way up. So this was an interesting one that only works for dual clutch transmissions, auto manuals, stuff like that. If you go to the manual gears, it doesn't move past the sport. A couple more things. This car has an basic version of active arrow. Obviously it doesn't work within Beam, but it does an animation. So when I press the brake hard, if you look down in the bottom left, you can see once I get to about, I think it's set to 70% or 75, the rear wing starts moving up. Sort of like a Bugatti Veyron kind of thing. In addition, at the front of this car, there are these little flaps. Once I turn, I think above 30% is what I set it, the flaps move up. Sort of like you would see on, I don't know, Pagani or something. Obviously, it doesn't have an effect in Automate or in Beam, but sort of looks cool. One last thing that you could do, which I haven't done in this car, is set the rear wing to come up as you hit a specified speed. So if you're utilizing the same way that we did with the RPMs, setting them for 1 RPM, or even setting for the rear wing how we set it to only move above 70%. If you set the rear wing to only start moving at, let's say, 150 kilometers an hour and finish moving at 180 kilometers an hour, then it would start lifting 150, finish moving at 180, and then the rear wing would be in a different position for the length of the time that you're using the car, or staying above that speed. So, interesting things you can do with Active Arrow. Obviously, they don't work in terms of providing more downforce, but look cool. So that's about it for this video. I am working on new functions and new functionality for the tool itself. Obviously, those may be a few weeks away or more, depending on how long it actually takes me to figure it out. If you do have any problems with this tool, or have any questions about how to utilize it, or you got any tips or recommendations for the program, always leave a comment. I'll see them. I'll respond. I can help you run through the tool. If you really need to, you can always send me a message in Discord as well. Pesky Boys, the exact same name as the YouTube channel, and I'll get back to you like that as well. So that's about it. I will put out a new video that has all the functions that I currently have, sort of as a long guide. It may take a couple weeks to make it, since I'm always adding new functions. So that's about it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.